friends, welcome again to my YouTube channel. So in today's video I will be talking to Waec and Jamb students about their prescribed texts. This is so important because most of the questions for Waec, most of the questions for Jamb would come from the prescribed texts, not from figures of speech, figures of sound, or literary principles and literary appreciation questions. Most of the questions will be coming from the prescribed text. So if more than 80% of the questions will be coming from the prescribed text, then it means that literature students need to be familiar with these texts and then prepare in that light. Remember again that the exams is just round the corner, so it's so important that you know what to read and start reading now, so that when the exams come, you'll be able to do well, without having to cheat. Yes. All right. Speaking of the prescribed text for Waec students, let me quickly point out here that the prescribed text for Waec students is more or less the same as for the Jamb. Only a slight variation in the poem, only a slight variation in the prescribed poems or poems for the Jamb students. But most of the texts that Waec students are expected to read is what Jamb students are expected to read for 2022 Jamb exams. So talking of the prescribed text for Waec students, literature Waec students, I will start first with the text that usually comes out in the multiple objective question in their paper 1, in the paper 1. In paper 1, questions 31 to 50 will be based on William Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. A Midsummer's Night Dream by William Shakespeare. So Waec students are expected to get that book and read it. However, I'm going to do an analysis of the text in one of my videos, so you can always look forward to it. But beyond that, I would strongly also advise that you get the text and read yourself. What it means by implication is that in your paper 1, of the 50 multiple objective questions, only 20 will be based on only 30 will be based on literary principles and literary appreciation questions. The rest of the questions will be based on the prescribed text. Okay, that's been taken care of. Speaking of paper 2, all of the questions in paper 2, the essay question, will be coming from the prescribed text. So students need to settle down to read. So I'm going to make a list of it. Now, speaking of the African prose, non-African prose, African drama, non-African drama that will feature in the paper 2, students are actually expected to read all, but read 4 on repeat. Pick any 4 out of 8 and read it on repeat. I'll take that again. For the essay part, the questions will be asked from the prescribed African prose and non-African prose, 2 each. African drama and non-African drama, 2 each. There are 2 texts each students are expected to read. However, on the day of the exam, you'll be expected to answer questions from one of the texts prescribed for African prose, one of the texts prescribed for African drama, one of the texts prescribed for non-African prose, one of the texts prescribed from non-African prose. Not all 2 each. So you're expected to read 4 of the texts. So for the African prose, you have Second Class Citizen, you have A Joy at Dawn, Unexpected Joy at Dawn rather. So between these 2 books, you're expected to read one of it on repeat. As you all know, we are treating Second Class Citizen already, we are reviewing Second Class Citizen. Then speaking of the non-African prose, you have Invisible Man and you have Wuthering Heights. You're expected to read one of these 2 texts on repeat, so that on the day of the exam, you would answer questions from that one. Then speaking of the non-African drama now, you have Lion and the Jewel, then you have Look Back in Anger. You're expected to read one of these texts on repeat. Then speaking of the non-African drama, you have Fences and you have I can't remember the name of the other one. So out of those two, Fences and the other one, you're expected to read it on repeat. Sorry, let me make a clarification. For the African drama, you have Lion and the Jewel, then you have Let Me Die Alone. You're expected to read one of the two on repeat. Then for the non-African drama, you have Fences and then you have Look Back in Anger, which you're expected to read one of the two texts on repeat. So you have a total of 4 texts you're expected to read on repeat. Reading them on repeat is so that you have a proper grasp. You retain in your memory the content of the texts, and then you'll be able to navigate your way around it, around the questions when you eventually sit for the exams. Then the third genre, which is the poetry, or if you like, poem. You have 6 African poems, 6 non-African poems. That one you are not expected to select anyone. You're expected to read all of the 12 texts. That is the 6 African poem, and then the 6 non-African poems. You're expected to read them on repeat, read them to a point of understanding, so that when questions are asked on them, on any of them, not necessarily all of them, but any of them, you don't know exactly which one questions will be coming out from. You will be able to conveniently write your essay on it. So these are the texts that Waec students are expected to read in readiness for their exams. So if we look at all, if we sum up all, we are going to be having 12 plus 4 plus 1, the one that comes out in the multiple objective question, 4 from the African and non-African prose, African and non-African drama. Then you have 12 speaking of the African and non-African poems. So Waec students are expected to read at least 21 books, or let's put it this way, you're expected to read at least 5 books, and you can always use exam focus or standard literature to run through the poems, then read 12 poems in all. So it's important that Waec students understand this matter. Alright, so Jamb students are expected to read almost the same texts with slight variation in the poem. The variation will be that Jamb students will be expected to also read or study, so to speak, poems such as Crossing the Bar by Alfred Tennyson and a few others like that. So I'm going to leave a link in the description box. If you can use that link to access the list of the books you are expected to read and you are expected to study in preparation for your literature exam, whether you're a Waec student or a Jamb student. So I'm going to be leaving 2 links, one for Waec students and the other for Jamb students. As always, thank you for your time. I'll see you again in the next video.